What truly changes your reality? Is it luck, effort, or something deeper? You might think it's about taking action, setting goals, or visualizing harder, but that's not what actually shifts the world around you. The hidden lever isn't what you do, it's how you observe. In today's video, I want to show you two simple shifts in perception that can alter the entire texture of your day. No rituals, no complicated methods, just awareness refined into precision. Together, we'll uncover how your attention silently shapes everything you experience, and how learning to see differently is the first real step to transforming your reality. It sounds simple, almost too simple, but sit with that for a moment. Two people can stand side by side watching the same sunset. One feels awe, gratitude, connection. The other feels nothing, maybe even a subtle ache of loneliness. The event is identical. The meaning, completely different. Reality, therefore, cannot be just what happens outside. It's what unfolds inside as you witness it. Every single moment, you're not only experiencing the world, you're interpreting it, assigning it value, filtering it through memory, emotion, and expectation. The raw data of life passes through a dense network of personal history before it becomes what you call reality. That means you never meet the world directly. You meet your version of it, your perception. Here's the subtle truth most people overlook. Your perception is not a passive act, it's a creative force. The way you look at something changes it, not metaphorically, but literally. In neuroscience, this is called the observer effect of attention. What you focus on lights up in your brain, forming new neural pathways and reinforcing old ones. Over time, these paths become highways, shaping what you notice and what you ignore. What was once invisible starts to stand out. What once mattered deeply starts to fade. Your brain edits reality according to the pattern of your perception. But this editing process happens so quietly that you assume what you're seeing is the whole picture. You think, this is just how things are. You forget that your attention has been sculpting that how all along. Think about a moment of tension with someone you care about. Maybe they said something sharp and instantly your body tightens. Your mind races to interpret. They're angry. They don't understand me. They always do this. In that instant, the world collapses into a narrow frame, a version of reality where you are misunderstood and they are distant. But if somehow you pause, if you notice your heartbeat, your breath, the story forming in your head, a gap appears. You might see their expression differently. Maybe there's not anger there, but exhaustion. Maybe the tone wasn't attack, but confusion. The moment you see that, reality changes shape before your eyes. This shift doesn't require mystical powers. It only requires awareness, because awareness is the quiet architect behind every version of your world. When you start observing without immediately judging, the texture of your reality softens. It becomes fluid again, flexible. You stop living in a fixed movie where everything is pre-written and start realizing you're the camera operator, the one deciding where to aim the lens. The same life, the same people, the same circumstances, but seen through a different aperture. Most people try to change their lives by changing the scenes, new job, new relationship, new city. But if you don't change the lens, the same themes keep replaying. The same frustration, the same miscommunication, the same longing dressed in different clothes. Because reality is not external scenery. It's your interpretation, projected outward. And here's where perception becomes both the trap and the key. The trap. You believe the story your mind tells about what's happening. The key. You realize it's only a story, one possible translation among infinite others. Once you see that, the edges of your world start to blur in the best way. Possibility seeps in. There's a quiet power in asking yourself, what else could this mean? Not to escape from truth, but to see how many truths can coexist. Because perception is not about being right, it's about being aware of how you construct right in the first place. In quantum physics, an electron behaves differently when observed. In psychology, a behavior changes when it becomes conscious. Both point to the same principle. Observation isn't neutral. The observer and the observed are entangled. The moment you witness with awareness, you're participating in creation. So when you catch yourself saying, "This is just how it is," pause. Whose voice is that? Is it your direct perception or a habit of interpretation inherited from years of repetition? Every assumption you question releases a new version of reality waiting underneath. Reality doesn't come to you ready-made. It unfolds from the quality of your seeing. And the more conscious your seeing becomes, the more coherent your world starts to feel. Coherence is that subtle alignment where thoughts, emotions, and external events begin to echo one another. It's when you stop fighting against life and begin moving with it, not because life has changed, but because your perception no longer divides it into enemy and ally. That's why two people can walk the same path, meet the same obstacles, and tell entirely different stories about what it means. One sees obstacles, the other initiations. One sees randomness, the other a pattern. The landscape is identical, but the realities are worlds apart. And yet, this understanding is not meant to make you chase better perceptions, as if awareness were another form of control. It's an invitation to notice, to realize that you're constantly painting the world with the color of your attention. Tomorrow morning, when you open your eyes before your thoughts rush in, look around your room as if you've never seen it before. The light on the wall, the air between objects, the way your breath moves through space. That simple act reboots the mechanism of perception. For a brief moment, you'll meet reality without the filter, and from that point of raw seeing, a new question begins to arise. Not about what's happening to you, but how you are observing it. Because that question leads you directly to the invisible mistake that keeps most people looping inside the same patterns of experience, day after day. It's almost imperceptible, the subtle mechanism that locks you into repetition. You wake up, tell yourself today will be different, and yet by evening the same emotional weather returns. Frustration, fatigue, resistance. You can change your plans, your words, even your surroundings, but the atmosphere inside remains stubbornly familiar. The invisible mistake lies not in what you do, but in how you observe. You've been trained almost from birth to observe life reactively. Something happens, and your attention rushes toward it like a reflex. You don't look to understand. You look to defend, to fix, to control, to avoid. Every observation becomes a preparation for reaction. The mind doesn't simply see, it scans for threat, for error, for confirmation of old beliefs. And that's the loop. Your observation is filtered through fear, and fear recreates what it expects to find. Imagine this. You wake up late, spill coffee, get stuck in traffic. Immediately the inner commentary begins. Here we go again. Nothing ever flows for me. You don't realize it, but the moment you observe the morning through that lens, the day has already been scripted. You'll notice every delay, every inconvenience, every micro-proof that life resists you, because that's the filter you've chosen. Your brain, loyal servant that it is, will keep delivering evidence that matches your initial observation. It's not malice, it's pattern recognition. It believes it's helping you survive by confirming what you already believe. This is how the invisible mistake operates. You observe reality through the residue of the past, then call it truth. You don't see the present as it is. You see it as a projection of your conditioning. Every reaction becomes a rehearsal of yesterday. The actors change, but the play remains the same. And here's the paradox. The more intensely you resist what you don't want, the more energy you feed it. The more you fight the pattern, the more it solidifies. Because what you resist is still being observed, still being charged with your attention. The universe, in its quiet precision, doesn't differentiate between want and don't want. It only responds to focus. Whether you love or hate something, your observation tells reality. This matters. Keep giving me more of this. Think of attention like sunlight. Wherever it falls, things grow. If you direct it toward complaint, complaint blossoms. If you direct it toward gratitude, gratitude multiplies. But the tricky part is not about thinking positive. It's about realizing how unconsciously your attention leaks into the very experiences you wish to escape. You think you're analyzing your problems, but you're actually rehearsing them, strengthening the neural circuits that keep them alive. There's a moment, if you watch carefully, between stimulus and response, that razor-thin pause where awareness lives. Most people never notice it. The old pattern jumps in first, a defensive tone, a judgmental thought, a sigh of disappointment. But if you catch that fraction of stillness before the reaction, you meet the real source of creation. That pause is not passive, it's pure potential. From there, you can choose to observe instead of react. Observation without reaction is the antidote to the invisible mistake. When you look at something, a conflict, an emotion, a setback, and simply see it for what it is, without rushing to label it as good or bad, you break the circuit that keeps the pattern alive. It's like pulling the plug on an old electrical loop. The energy stops recycling and becomes available for something new. Of course, this is uncomfortable at first. The mind wants closure. It wants the familiar rhythm of judgment. It believes that naming the experience gives it control. But naming is a form of repetition, a way of dragging the past into the present. True observation feels quieter, slower, even awkward, because it leaves space where the old identity used to be. And in that space, new possibilities begin to assemble. Watch how this plays out in everyday life. You're talking to someone, and they interrupt you. Instantly, you feel irritation rise, a small wave of defensiveness. Normally, you'd follow it, cross your arms, withdraw, retaliate. But instead, try this. Stay still for 2 breaths. Observe the physical sensations, the heat in your chest, the tension in your jaw, the thought that says, "They don't respect me." Just watch it, as if you were studying weather patterns. Don't suppress it. Don't indulge it. Within seconds, the wave changes shape. You might notice something unexpected, the other person's nervousness, or your own habit of needing validation. That small act of neutral observation shifts the entire dynamic. The external moment remains the same, but your inner alignment changes, and that's where real transformation begins. The invisible mistake, then, is not failure or ignorance, it's unconscious observation. It's watching the world through a veil of reactivity. It's assuming that perception equals truth, when in fact, perception is often just memory replaying itself. When you begin to observe differently, you disrupt the predictability of your own life. The same situation that once triggered you starts to dissolve in your awareness. You stop being pulled by automatic responses, and something subtler emerges, discernment. Instead of reacting, you start seeing. Instead of fighting against what happens, you begin to notice how your attention shapes what happens next. But here's the twist. When you first practice this, it doesn't always feel liberating. In fact, it can feel as if your challenges intensify. The old patterns don't vanish quietly. They rise, demanding to be noticed, as if the universe is holding up a mirror and asking, "Are you sure you're done with this version of yourself?" That moment, the return of old triggers just when you thought you'd evolved, is not a failure. It's the natural test of observation itself. It's reality verifying whether you're reacting from the past or responding from awareness. And that precisely is where your next frontier begins. When you start recognizing that what feels like resistance might actually be recalibration. This is the truth that quietly undoes almost every self-help promise ever written. You can set goals, repeat affirmations, visualize success until your voice goes hoarse. But if your attention keeps orbiting around doubt, fear, and lack, that's the frequency you broadcast. The universe doesn't react to what you wish for. It reacts to what you consistently notice. Intentions live in the mind. Attention lives in the field of your awareness, the energy you radiate without words. You can say, "I want peace," but if your focus is on conflict, your system is tuned to conflict. You can intend abundance, but if your attention is caught by what's missing, scarcity becomes your lens. The gap between intention and attention is where most people get trapped. They mistake thinking about something for tuning into it. Imagine walking through a crowded city street. You could intend to have a calm, inspired day, but if your attention is darting from noise to complaint to irritation, your experience will echo that frequency. It's not that your intention was wrong, it's that it was overpowered by your habitual attention. Intention is like writing a destination on a map. Attention is the steering wheel. If your hands are still gripping the past, the car never moves. In neuroscience, attention is not just a mental act, it's an electrical one. Every time you focus on something, neurons fire together, forming pathways that strengthen that pattern of perception. The more you focus on worry, the easier it becomes to worry again. The more you focus on gratitude, the easier it becomes to see what's working. Your brain doesn't care about your ideals, it follows your focus. The world within and the world without mirror that principle perfectly. That's why you can't fake attention. It reveals what you truly believe, not what you say you believe. You might affirm that you trust life, but if your attention keeps scanning for what might go wrong, your nervous system is broadcasting mistrust. And reality, sensitive as a tuning fork, vibrates back in kind. Watch how this plays out in subtle ways. You meet someone new, and your intention is to connect authentically. But your attention is on whether they like you, whether you're saying the right thing, whether you sound confident enough. So instead of connection, you generate tension. The conversation feels forced, and afterward you tell yourself, "See, I'm just not good with people." But it wasn't you who failed. It was your attention, scattered between fear and performance. Or consider the opposite. You're working on something meaningful, fully absorbed in the task, not worried about outcomes or opinions. Hours pass like minutes. That's what happens when attention and intention align. Your energy becomes coherent and the world seems to cooperate. People respond differently, ideas flow, synchronicities appear. You're no longer pushing reality, you're moving with it. The world doesn't respond to your words, your plans, or your ideals. It responds to the subtle current of where your awareness actually rests. And because most people never consciously train their attention, it gets hijacked. By anxiety, by comparison, by screens, by habit. The result is a fragmented perception, a life that feels scattered because the inner lens is constantly switching channels. Attention is the currency of reality. Whatever you spend it on, you buy more of. When you invest it unconsciously in complaint, resentment, or judgment, those experiences compound like interest. But when you start observing where your attention goes, truly observing without self-blame, something begins to shift. You realize that most of your suffering wasn't caused by events themselves, but by the gravitational pull of your focus toward what you fear most. There's a small exercise you can try. As you go about your day, notice what repeatedly captures your attention. Not what you want to focus on, but what your mind gravitates toward automatically. The tone of someone's voice. A subtle irritation. The need to be right. The background hum of worry about time. That's your true meditation, discovering the invisible magnet that shapes your reality moment by moment. Once you see it, you can redirect it. Not by force, but by choice. Attention, like light, can be softened and guided. You can decide to notice what's already supporting you. The body breathing, the chair holding you, the rhythm of sound and silence. As attention relaxes into the present, your nervous system recalibrates, and when that happens, life begins to feel less like a struggle and more like a reflection of coherence. People often confuse control with awareness. They think, if I just manage every detail, I can get what I want. But control is a form of resistance, and resistance always narrows attention. Awareness expands it. When you observe without the tension of needing outcomes, you open a field where reality can synchronize with you. In that openness, you start noticing subtle feedback, events, gestures, coincidences, all pointing to how precisely the world mirrors your focus. This is why attention is more powerful than intention. Intention tries to impose direction. Attention reveals alignment. You can only receive what your awareness can perceive. If your focus is trapped in the narrow corridor of what's missing, abundance can be right beside you and still remain invisible. And yet, shifting attention is not about ignoring what's unpleasant. It's about refusing to feed it with unconscious fascination. The goal is not to escape reality, but to see it clearly, to observe both the shadow and the light without letting either dominate your field. That balance is what creates coherence between your inner state and outer experience. When you start to live this way, small things begin to transform. The same people, the same routines, the same world, but a different texture. What once triggered irritation starts to appear as information. You begin to sense that life is in constant dialogue with your attention, responding with precision to every fluctuation of awareness. And if you stay long enough in that awareness, you start to notice something even deeper. There's a force beneath attention itself, the unconscious focus, the default lens that operates when you're not even trying. That layer is what silently dominates your reality, the one you never consciously choose, but that still directs the movie of your life. And that's where the next revelation begins, in understanding that the most powerful attention of all is the one you don't yet see. At first glance, neutral observation sounds passive, almost indifferent. But neutrality is not absence, it's precision. It's the capacity to see without distorting what you see, and this is precisely what most people lose in the noise of interpretation. From the moment something happens, the mind races to define, categorize, and compare. It doesn't just witness, it judges. It doesn't just perceive, it evaluates. And in doing so, it alters the reality it's trying to understand. When you remove judgment, even for a brief second, reality reveals its raw texture, unfiltered, uncolored by desire or resistance. But that window of neutrality is fragile. The mind can't stand silence for long. It wants to call things good or bad, for me or against me. It feeds on polarity because judgment gives it the illusion of control, yet the price of that control is clarity. Imagine standing before a painting. Instead of just looking, your mind immediately starts analyzing. I like the colors, I don't like the form, this reminds me of something else. Within seconds, you've stopped seeing the painting. You're now seeing your own opinions about it. Life operates the same way. Events unfold, but what you meet are your interpretations, not the events themselves. The result is confusion, not because reality is complex, but because your commentary never stops. Neutral observation cuts through that commentary. It's the act of seeing a thing exactly as it is before the story forms. It doesn't mean becoming detached or numb. It means holding attention steady enough to allow reality to show itself before your conditioning edits it. This is not easy. The human nervous system was designed for survival, not objectivity. It scans constantly for threat, pattern, and meaning. Evolutionarily, judgment kept you alive. Spiritually, it now keeps you limited. The moment you can observe without attaching identity, this means I'm failing, this means I'm loved, this means I'm unsafe, you begin to meet life as energy instead of narrative. Consider a moment when someone criticizes you. Instinctively, your body reacts. Maybe tension in the stomach, heat in the chest, a flash of defensiveness. The mind rushes to interpret. They're wrong, or I always mess up. But what if, for a few breaths, you simply observe the sensations without the story? Just notice the vibration in your body, the tightness, the temperature, the pulse. You're not suppressing it, you're studying it like weather. That's neutral observation. And something remarkable happens when you practice it. Emotion moves through you instead of getting stuck in you. The energy dissipates because it's finally being seen without resistance. This ability to hold experience without adding judgment is what mystics and scientists have both described, each in their own language. In physics, neutrality corresponds to coherence, a field undisturbed by interference. In psychology, it resembles meta-awareness, the mind observing itself without interference. Both point to the same law. Observation without reaction restores balance. Neutral observation is not cold detachment. It's warmth without grasping. It's compassion without narrative. It's like looking at a flame and feeling its light without needing to possess or extinguish it. This neutrality does not make you passive. It makes you powerful because it frees you from being unconsciously pulled into every emotional current around you. Most people are unaware of how much judgment drains their attention. Every internal label, unfair, ugly, wrong, amazing, mine, consumes energy. It's like static on a radio signal. Neutral observation clears that static. When you stop naming everything, you start hearing more. The subtler layers of reality become audible: timing, rhythm, resonance. The world stops feeling random. and starts revealing pattern. In daily life, this practice transforms ordinary moments. You're stuck in traffic, for example. Instead of labeling it bad or wasteful, you simply observe the movement of cars, the play of light on metal, the rhythm of your breath against the slow pulse of time. The event remains the same, but your relationship with it changes entirely. Stress dissolves because it was never the traffic itself that created tension. It was your judgment of what the traffic should be. This is why neutrality is so misunderstood. People assume it means apathy, when in truth it's the foundation of clear perception. A neutral observer doesn't withdraw from life. They participate in it without distortion. They become like still water, reflecting everything clearly because they're not stirred by every ripple. And when your perception becomes still like that, something subtle yet profound occurs. The boundaries between you and what you observe start to blur. You begin to sense that the external world isn't happening to you but through you. The separation between observer and observed begins to soften, revealing an underlying unity. This isn't philosophy, it's direct experience. But here's where most people falter. The first time they try to remain neutral in a heated moment, it feels wrong, almost unnatural. They mistake neutrality for weakness, as if not reacting means losing power. Yet true neutrality is not the absence of emotion, it's mastery over the mechanism of reaction. You still feel everything, but you're no longer ruled by what you feel. That's a deeper strength, one born not of suppression, but of understanding. And if you sustain this practice, you'll notice reality responding differently. People argue less around you. Circumstances seem to settle faster. It's not magic, it's resonance. When your observation loses charge, the external situation loses friction. Life reflects your neutrality with balance. Eventually, you start realizing that this skill, pure, uncharged observation, is not just a tool for peace. It's the doorway to transformation. Because when you can see without distortion, you can also see the patterns within yourself that create distortion in the first place. You notice the small reflexes of fear, the subtle urges to control, the quiet echoes of old pain. You begin to see how your internal noise has been painting over reality all along, and that moment of realization is where a new layer of awareness opens, the understanding that what you see outside is inseparable from what's happening inside. Every judgment cast outward has an origin within. Every distortion of perception is a reflection of an internal imbalance waiting to be recognized. That is the bridge to the next revelation. That you are not seeing the world as it is, you are seeing it as you are. That sentence sounds poetic until you realize it's diagnostic. It's not metaphor, it's mechanics. The external world is not filtered through some neutral lens. It's refracted through the architecture of your own consciousness. You don't look at reality, you look from it. And what you call the world is largely a projection of the inner patterns you haven't yet recognized. Every perception you have passes through a field of memory, belief, and emotional residue. Those filters operate so automatically that they feel invisible, like glass so clean you forget it's there. But every layer of that glass bends light in a slightly different way. What you call your truth is the pattern of that refraction. Change the filter and the world itself seems to shift. Think about it. Two people witness the same event. A friend cancels dinner. One feels rejected, another feels relieved for the extra quiet time. The event didn't change, the inner lens did. Your interpretation is the world you inhabit. The external action was only the mirror, faithfully reflecting your own state. You might believe you're perceiving objectively, but you're not. You're perceiving through the emotional climate you carry. When you're anxious, the world vibrates with threat. When you're grateful, it feels generous. When you're angry, everything seems to conspire against you. The world never agreed to change. Only your point of observation did. It's humbling to realize how little of what we call reality is actually external. The majority of it is interpretation, a living echo of who you currently are. What you notice, what irritates you, what inspires you, what you call beautiful or wrong, all of it maps back to the internal frequencies of your being. You are not passively observing the world, you are actively coloring it. Psychologically, this is known as projection, the mind externalizing what it cannot yet hold internally. Spiritually, it's called mirroring, the universe arranging itself to reveal you to yourself. So either way, the message is identical. Everything you resist, desire, or judge is telling you something about your own composition. When you walk through your day, life functions like a diagnostic tool. Each encounter reveals the quality of your perception. A stranger's tone, a delay in traffic, a forgotten promise. They are not random annoyances, they are mirrors reflecting where your consciousness contracts. You think the world is pressing against you, but it's your own resistance you're feeling. Try observing this in real time. You receive an email that feels disrespectful. Before reacting, pause. Feel the surge in your body, the tightening, the heat, the impulse to defend. Ask yourself, what part of me feels unseen? The answer doesn't come from the other person, it comes from the echo inside. The moment you recognize it, something softens. The email remains the same, but the charge dissolves. That's the subtle alchemy of awareness, reality transforming in proportion to your willingness to see yourself through it. This doesn't mean external events don't matter. It means your experience of them is inseparable from your internal state. Two people can live in the same apartment, work the same job, and walk the same streets, and inhabit completely different worlds. One moves through a landscape of tension and scarcity, another through a field of synchronicity and connection. The difference isn't luck, it's perception shaped by inner alignment. In neuroscience, perception is shaped by predictive coding, the brain's tendency to interpret incoming data through the lens of what it already expects. You literally see what you expect to see. Your nervous system is a storyteller, editing sensory input to confirm its existing worldview. The spiritual counterpart of that discovery is ancient. As within, so without. Change your inner expectation, and your sensory experience reorganizes to match it. That's why deep inner work always precedes outer transformation. You can rearrange circumstances endlessly, but until you shift the observer, the movie remains the same. Your relationships, your opportunities, even your obstacles will keep echoing the same lesson until the pattern within you changes frequency. The world is loyal to your vibration, not your intentions. There's a strange grace in this realization. You begin to understand that life is not punishing you, it's mirroring you. Every confrontation, every disappointment, every delay, these are not enemies. They are diagnostic signals pointing you toward aspects of yourself that crave integration. Once seen clearly, they stop repeating because they've fulfilled their function, to reveal you to yourself. This is where personal responsibility deepens into freedom. When you stop blaming circumstances for your experience, you reclaim the power to reinterpret them. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you start asking, "What is this showing me about me?" That single shift moves you from victim to observer, from reaction to creation. The danger of this insight, however, is subtle spiritual ego, the belief that if the world mirrors you, you must be wrong whenever things go wrong. But mirrors don't judge, they reflect. Seeing your reflection doesn't mean you're flawed, it means you're visible. The goal is not perfection, but awareness. Awareness lets you respond instead of react, to adjust your inner lens rather than shatter the mirror. You start realizing that reality doesn't need to be controlled, it needs to be understood. Every moment becomes an opportunity to recalibrate your seeing. When you soften the inner distortion, fear, resentment, self-doubt, the outer image clears. What once appeared as conflict now appears as communication. What once felt like chaos begins to reveal rhythm. The world itself hasn't changed, your resonance with it has. And yet, this awareness brings a new kind of challenge. When you begin to shift your inner state, the outer world often pushes back. Old situations resurface, familiar triggers return, as if life is testing the stability of your new vibration. It's easy to think you're regressing, that the mirror has betrayed you. But this is not regression, it's recalibration. Reality is simply asking, have you really changed? And that's the next threshold, the moment when your new way of seeing meets its first trial, when life appears to worsen just as your awareness expands. It's not punishment, It's proof that your inner transformation is beginning to reach the surface. It always arrives disguised as inconvenience, the phone call that stirs old emotions, the familiar pattern that reappears just when you thought you'd transcended it. The world seems to echo back everything you're trying to leave behind. It's in these moments that reality feels like a trickster, taunting you, questioning your progress, pulling you into the gravity of who you used to be. But this isn't punishment, it's verification. Reality is not testing your worth, it's testing your stability. When you begin to change internally, the external field must recalibrate. Old frequencies rise to the surface because they can't exist in the new vibration you're cultivating. They appear not to pull you backward, but to give you the chance to respond differently, to confirm that the shift you feel inside isn't just theory, but embodiment. You've changed your perception. Now life asks, can you hold it when the pattern knocks again? Picture it. You've been practicing calm awareness, feeling grounded, centered. Then, without warning, an argument erupts, or an unexpected bill arrives, or a door you were sure would open suddenly slams shut. The reflex of the old self stirs. Frustration, doubt, defense. But if you pause, even for a breath, you'll sense something new beneath the surface, a faint awareness that this isn't random. You're not being attacked. You're being calibrated. Every system that evolves is tested for coherence. In physics, new structures must withstand stress to prove their stability. The same principle applies to consciousness. Your transformation isn't complete until it holds under pressure, not because the universe is cruel, but because reality only integrates change that can remain centered in motion. If your new awareness collapses at the first sign of discomfort, it remains conceptual, not embodied. The test, then, isn't about enduring suffering. It's about meeting recurrence with awareness instead of reaction. When the old storyline appears, the question is not why is this happening again, but how will I meet it this time? The same scene returns, but you have the chance to occupy a new role within it. And that subtle difference, a breath instead of a reaction, a pause instead of a defense, shifts the entire geometry of your experience. It's easy to speak of consciousness when things are calm, but awareness earns its depth in turbulence. When life shakes you, your attention becomes visible. You can finally see where it hides when comfort fades. The old habits surface, the need to control, to be right, to predict. Each one is a doorway disguised as discomfort. Each one invites you to witness rather than repeat. Notice the next time reality feels like it's testing you, it might show up through someone's tone, a delay, or an unexpected detour. Watch the story your mind writes. Here it comes again, I knew it wouldn't last, nothing's changing. That story is the remnant of the old self, trying to reclaim control through familiarity. But if you observe it neutrally, like clouds passing through a sky you no longer identify with, something extraordinary happens. The pattern loses traction. Your awareness becomes larger than the experience itself. And in that spaciousness, the test dissolves. There's a quiet law operating here. Everything you haven't fully accepted will revisit you until you do, not as punishment, but as integration. Avoidance keeps the loop alive. Observation closes it. The pattern persists only because it hasn't yet been witnessed without resistance. When you finally meet it with presence, not with analysis, not with suppression, but with clear seeing, the circuit completes, and the energy that once bound you is released. The test often comes right after a moment of breakthrough. You feel lighter, clear, expanded, and then suddenly chaos. It's tempting to think you've lost your progress, but what's actually happening is reorganization. Energy that once supported the old identity is trying to find its new configuration. The storm isn't a reversal, it's a realignment. The ground beneath you is shifting to match the new vibration you've chosen. In that sense, every test is a mirror held closer to your face. It shows you the part still caught in reaction, still craving control, still fearing uncertainty. If you can watch without judgment, you'll see that these fragments aren't enemies. They're the unintegrated aspects of yourself asking to be included in your new awareness. Integration doesn't mean denying the old self. It means holding it gently until it dissolves into understanding. That's why spiritual growth often feels like regression before it feels like evolution. You meet the same characters, the same frustrations, but from a new level of consciousness. The difference is not that life has changed, but that you have changed enough to notice the pattern as pattern, no longer as fate. Once you see that, you no longer need to fight what returns. You start using every echo of the old reality as a mirror for refinement. And yet, the process doesn't stop here. Because once you stop resisting the test, something remarkable happens. The very energy that once felt adversarial begins to collaborate with you. The challenges turn into coordinates, signals guiding you toward coherence. You realize the universe was never testing to see if you'd fail. It was checking if you could stay awake while everything around you tried to pull you back to sleep. When you pass that threshold, not by defeating the test but by seeing through it, your reality begins to reconfigure in ways that seem improbable. Patterns that haunted you dissolve. Interactions change tone. The outer world bends subtly toward the stillness you've cultivated inside. And that's the moment you discover a deeper key. Transformation doesn't depend on escaping discomfort, but on observing it long enough for the old world to lose its grip. Because what separates those who truly transform from those who turn back isn't luck or intellect. It's the willingness to stay present when the storm returns. The next step begins exactly there, in that threshold between resistance and surrender, where discomfort stops being an obstacle and becomes a teacher. Every transformation reaches a threshold, a quiet, invisible line where most people turn back. It's not the line of failure or lack of desire, it's the moment when discomfort becomes too intimate. The point where the new self demands that the old one stop negotiating. This is where many confuse the dissolution of identity with defeat. But those who cross that line understand something crucial. Discomfort is not a sign that transformation is failing, it's the proof that it's working. Real change never feels graceful while it's happening. It feels disorienting, raw, and uncertain. The mind wants clarity. Transformation offers only truth, and truth rarely arrives neatly packaged. When you start dismantling the structures that kept you safe, the first thing you feel is exposure. The stories that once defined you no longer fit, yet the new language of being hasn't fully formed. That in-between space, that unsteady silence, is where most give up. Those who continue understand that the discomfort itself is the material of rebirth. They don't fight the confusion. They observe it. They don't try to restore the old sense of control. They allow the chaos to reorganize them. The difference is subtle, but immense. Giving up happens when you interpret discomfort as punishment. Transformation happens when you recognize it as recalibration. The people who transform learn to stay with the intensity without rushing for relief. When the old emotional patterns rise, the fear, the impatience, the longing for validation, they don't suppress them or indulge them. They witness them. Observation becomes the bridge between the self that reacts and the self that evolves. The moment you can observe your storm instead of becoming it, transformation moves from theory to embodiment. Think of a seed breaking open underground. From the outside, it looks like destruction. The hard shell that once protected it begins to crack, the interior exposed to soil and pressure. But within that pressure, the new form begins to emerge. The same law governs human growth. When you start expanding beyond your old identity, it will feel like things are falling apart, but they're actually falling into alignment. The key, then, is endurance of awareness. Not endurance of pain, not endurance of chaos, but the capacity to remain conscious while everything familiar unravels. Those who give up seek comfort at the expense of truth. Those who transform choose truth even when comfort disappears. It's not about heroism, it's about willingness. The willingness to stay awake inside uncertainty long enough for a new coherence to form. Watch this in yourself. The moment discomfort rises, notice the reflex to fix it, to rush toward answers, distractions, or premature conclusions. That's the mind's attempt to escape transformation by pretending to solve it. But if you resist that impulse and remain in observation, something different happens. The wave of discomfort peaks, then begins to dissolve. You discover that presence itself is the solvent, that awareness doesn't need to control experience to transform it. It only needs to stay. Those who master this art begin to live from a deeper intelligence, one that doesn't rely on the old binaries of success or failure, right or wrong, progress or regression. They start seeing life as a self-correcting system, where every challenge is feedback, not judgment. The world stops feeling like an obstacle course and starts functioning as a mirror for integration. And yet, the simplicity of this truth makes it difficult. Most people have been conditioned to measure change by visible results: a new job, a healed relationship, a calmer mood. But transformation doesn't always advertise itself that way. Sometimes the deepest progress looks like stillness, the choice not to repeat an old reaction, even when every cell in your body wants to. That single act of non-reaction is invisible on the outside, but seismic within. There's a quiet moment, sometimes weeks, sometimes years, when you start realizing that life no longer provokes you the same way. The situations haven't vanished, but your relationship with them has. You no longer interpret friction as failure. You read it as refinement. That's the mark of real transformation. The external world doesn't stop challenging you, it stops owning you. This is the point where resilience becomes resonance. You stop pushing against reality and begin moving with it. You start trusting the intelligence that's guiding your unfolding, the same intelligence that moves tides, seasons, and stars. You no longer demand immediate reward for your inner work. You know that coherence has its own rhythm. You sense that everything in your path is precision-tuned to the frequency of your current awareness. And then, something curious happens. The very people who once doubted you, the circumstances that once resisted you, begin to rearrange themselves subtly. The friction you endured starts to function as alignment. The mirror that once showed conflict now begins to reflect synchronicity. Because when you stop feeding resistance with reactivity, reality has no choice but to evolve to match your stillness. The key, then, isn't strength in the traditional sense. It's steadiness of perception. It's remembering that the storm is not personal. It's procedural. That the world is not testing if you'll break, it's confirming whether you've become transparent enough for the new light to pass through. And as that transparency grows, another shift begins to emerge. A moment when the observer and the observed start to change together, revealing a deeper law of resonance that governs the dance between awareness and reality itself. There comes a moment when something invisible yet undeniable shifts. The world doesn't alter dramatically overnight. It's subtler than that. The air feels lighter. Conversations flow differently. Circumstances that once drained you seem to rearrange themselves without your intervention. You start to sense that reality has begun to respond to a different signal, yours. It's not coincidence, it's coherence. The observer has changed, and therefore, the observed cannot remain the same. This is the quiet law that underlies all transformation. Perception shapes participation. When you alter the lens through which you experience life, you alter the field you're experiencing. Physics hints at this through the observer effect, the discovery that the mere act of observation influences the behavior of particles. Consciousness studies echo it through neuroplasticity, the brain reorganizing itself according to where attention consistently rests. Both point to the same principle. Awareness is not passive. It's a force that reorganizes the patterns it perceives. At first, this change feels accidental. You react to an old trigger, but your response lands softer. Someone's harshness no longer stings the same way. You pause before answering, and in that microsecond of stillness, a new outcome emerges. The conversation de-escalates, the atmosphere shifts. What you once met with defense, you now meet with observation, and reality mirrors that neutrality back to you. What used to be conflict now becomes communication. This isn't magic, it's mechanics. The external world is a reflection of the internal frequency you broadcast. The tone of your awareness ripples through the field of your relationships, your work, your decisions. When the observer stops reacting, the energetic charge dissolves from the pattern itself. You've interrupted the feedback loop that kept the same situations repeating. Think of life as a vast network of mirrors. For years you looked into them unconsciously, assuming the reflections were real. Then slowly, You began to notice that the reflection changed when you shifted your stance, when you softened your gaze, when you let go of judgment. The mirrors didn't stop reflecting. They simply reflected a new angle of you. That's the turning point, realizing that reality has always been in dialogue with your consciousness, waiting for a new signal to respond to. The old self tried to change the world by force, through control, persuasion, strategy. But force operates within duality. Every push creates an equal resistance. The new self moves through resonance. When your inner state becomes coherent, you no longer fight the environment. You tune it. You align instead of demand. You radiate instead of react. The field organizes itself around that clarity because coherence is magnetic. Chaos cannot sustain itself in the presence of integrated awareness. You start noticing improbable events, a person appearing just when you need them, a delay revealing perfect timing, a coincidence resolving something that logic couldn't. It's tempting to call this luck, but it's resonance at work. When the observer changes frequency, the fabric of reality rearranges to maintain balance. The universe, in its subtle intelligence, recalibrates to reflect the new pattern of consciousness. This is why transformation doesn't depend solely on effort. Effort alone belongs to the old paradigm, the belief that action precedes alignment. But the truth is reversed. Alignment precedes action. When you act from a field of coherence, your smallest gestures carry exponential impact. A word spoken from clarity can redirect an entire conversation. A decision made from stillness can dissolve years of struggle. The quality of the observer defines the outcome of the observed. However, this turning point requires humility. It's easy to slip into the illusion of control, to think, if my awareness shapes reality, I can make anything happen. But awareness isn't manipulation, it's participation. The observer doesn't dictate the dance, it joins it consciously. When you truly see this, your relationship with life softens. You stop forcing outcomes and start collaborating with the unfolding. The external world becomes less of a battlefield and more of a feedback system, guiding you toward deeper alignment. And yet this shift doesn't happen uniformly. There are moments when the old world pulls back, testing the durability of your new awareness. Just when coherence begins to stabilize, a familiar situation reappears, but now you notice it sooner. You catch yourself before falling into the old story. That instant of recognition is evolution itself. The world you once fought begins to function as an ally in your awakening. In this state, attention becomes your most powerful instrument. Wherever you place it, reality organizes itself accordingly. When your attention rests in fear, chaos multiplies. When it rests in observation, harmony emerges. You begin to see that every situation, pleasant or painful, is neutral until you interpret it. The power has never been in the event, it has always been in the observer's relationship with it. As your perception stabilizes in awareness rather than reactivity, the feedback from reality becomes increasingly refined. You sense patterns resolving faster. Relationships begin to mirror back calm instead of conflict. The same world remains, but the signal passing through it has changed tone. What was once noise becomes rhythm. What once appeared random begins to pulse with intelligence. And in that awareness, a deeper insight begins to unfold, one that shifts the very foundation of your relationship with life. You start realizing that true power doesn't come from controlling the external, but from embodying the field through which the external arises. You don't need to manipulate the movie when you've become aware of the projector. This recognition opens the next horizon. Understanding that the real power is not in changing reality at all, but in becoming the consciousness that gives it form. Control is the last illusion to fall away. It's the most seductive, the most persistent and the hardest to surrender, because it hides inside even our highest intentions. The desire to heal, to grow, to manifest, beneath them all is often the same subtle craving, to manage life into alignment, to sculpt the future into safety. Yet every attempt to control is rooted in separation. It implies that life is out there, and you are in here, trying to bend it into order. But when awareness matures, a deeper recognition dawns, that you were never separate from the field you were trying to command. You are the field. In physics, a field is not an object. It's the space of influence through which particles move. It's the invisible framework that gives rise to form. Consciousness operates the same way. The events of your life, relationships, opportunities, challenges, are particles. They behave according to the field of energy that emanates from your state of being. When your awareness is fragmented, your field generates interference. When your awareness becomes coherent, your field organizes into harmony. And from that harmony, life begins to assemble itself around you with an elegance that control could never achieve. This is why control always fails. It operates on the level of the particle, not the field. It rearranges form without addressing frequency. You can chase outcomes, manage circumstances, even force temporary results, but without coherence they collapse under their own weight. The field, your inner vibration, always reasserts itself. Reality is not listening to your words or your strategies. It's responding to the tone of your consciousness. When you begin to sense yourself as the field, the way you move through life changes entirely. You stop reacting to circumstances as if they are threats or tests, and begin perceiving them as fluctuations within your own energetic atmosphere. You don't fight the weather, you understand it. You don't demand that the ocean calm itself. You adjust your sail to the current. The more you rest in that awareness, the more you realize that external control is a kind of noise, a resistance pattern that interferes with the natural intelligence of the whole. The true work is not manipulation, but maintenance of inner resonance. It's the discipline of staying attuned to the quiet equilibrium beneath the turbulence of events. The paradox is that when you stop trying to control reality, you start influencing it effortlessly. The world reorganizes around your inner coherence because coherence is contagious. It's not persuasion, it's physics. Systems tend toward order when exposed to stable energy. You can feel this in everyday interactions. When you're agitated, even neutral events seem to push against you. People mirror your tension unconsciously. But when you're steady, the same situations soften. Conversations open. Obstacles turn into synchronistic timing. What changed wasn't the external script. It was the field through which you were perceiving it. The universe mirrors your inner stability because you and it are not two separate things exchanging energy. You are one continuous process expressing itself through attention. This realization is both humbling and liberating. Humbling because it dissolves the illusion of control, liberating because it replaces control with creative participation. You stop forcing life and start listening to it. You begin to sense the intelligence beneath chaos, the pattern within what once seemed random. Every moment becomes communication, a subtle exchange between consciousness and form. The field is constantly speaking. Control had only made the signal too loud to hear. When you embody the field, your presence becomes your primary instrument. The mind still thinks, the body still acts, but both function as expressions of the deeper coherence you hold. You no longer move through life as a personality trying to manage circumstances. You move as awareness animating form. From this state, creation becomes less about effort and more about permission. You allow life to flow through you instead of trying to push it from you. In this space, even decision-making transforms. Choices no longer come from analysis or fear of missing out. They emerge naturally from alignment. You feel your way forward rather than calculate it. You trust resonance more than logic. The future stops feeling like a place you must reach and starts revealing itself as a frequency you inhabit. That is what it means to be the field, to participate in reality as its source, not its subject. The irony is that the power you once tried to seize through control only becomes available when you release control altogether. The universe doesn't yield to demand. It harmonizes with coherence. Control constricts, coherence expands. When you stop resisting what is, your field relaxes, and in that relaxation the intelligence of creation flows unobstructed through you. And then something extraordinary begins to unfold. Your life ceases to feel like a sequence of separate events and starts to move like music. Each moment becomes a note, perfectly placed within a larger harmony you don't need to conduct, only to feel. You realize that the same force that aligns planets and pulls tides is orchestrating your timing, your encounters, your evolution. The need to dominate reality gives way to the joy of participating in it. You no longer chase manifestation as proof of power. You live in a state where creation happens as a natural side effect of coherence. You stop being the thinker trying to control thoughts and become the awareness through which thought itself arises and dissolves. You become the space, not the story. And as you settle into that awareness, the boundary between inner and outer fades completely. You recognize that the field is not confined to you. It extends into everything you touch, everything you perceive. The more you align with it, the more the visible world begins to curve toward your stillness, reflecting a deeper truth. Reality is not something you control. It's something you continuously create by the quality of being you bring to this exact moment. Reality doesn't shift because you force it. It shifts because you do. The moment you start observing differently, the world reorganizes around that awareness. You begin to see that every situation is a reflection, not a verdict. Every challenge, an invitation to refine the field you are. Control fades, coherence rises, and life starts to move in rhythm with you instead of against you. Right now, pause for a breath. Look around. The objects, the light, the space between sounds. This too is your creation. If you made it all the way here, write "I am the field" in the comments so I know you reached the end consciously. And if this message resonated with you, watch one of the videos appearing on your screen. Each one deepens this exploration of awareness, attention, and reality itself.